All right, guys, welcome back to part 2 of replacing the rear brakes of a Subaru Forester. This setup should look pretty familiar to you. We have the jack stand holding up the car. We have the jack holding the suspension up, which allowed me to remove the tire on the rim. I put that underneath the car as a widow saver that will prevent the car from dropping should this guy fail and that guy fail. The car can only drop as far as the thickness of the rim there. I don't intend to be underneath it, but that's good practice. We do have a few more things. We have my Mary Poppins tool bag in the back of the car. We have the torque wrench for putting things together. We have the breaker bar for taking them apart. We have the 5 lug nuts. Again, see my original video on how to remove those. I have a cardboard box from last night's dinner. That may come into play here shortly with the brake rotor. Plastic bag. We have some multi-purpose grease, some brake lubricant, and some brake parts cleaner, and a scrub brush. So I'll be adding to that as we go along, but the idea here is we're going to go ahead and remove our brake rotor. And while we're in there, we're going to take the caliper off. We're going to clean as we go, and I'm going to replace those brake pads as well. So currently, I'm going to need a 15 and a 14, a 17 and a 14 millimeter socket. And we're going to go after the 4 bolts. We have 1, 2, and on the bottom, we have 3, and then a 4th one. We're going to go after those. That's going to allow the brake caliper to come off, and that's going to allow the rotor to be removed from the rear axle, as well as give me access to those brake pads. So I'm going to see if I can't do that with this tripod, and if not, you'll just have to take my word for it. I would hit record now. Those are the electric company trucks coming to the transformer next door. Hopefully we'll be getting power here shortly, but back to current project. We have the 14 millimeter on there. So we're going to start with the ones on the brake caliper themselves instead of removing the brake caliper. The reason behind that is if this one is loose, then this is going to be moving as I'm trying to torque it. Same principle as having the tire down on the ground to allow you to get better torque on that. So we're going to start on the smaller ones, and then we're going to move up to the bigger ones. All right, so we remove these guys, and you can see it's going to start wobbling. I'm going to leave the big boys in place. Right now, we're going to try removing the caliper, and then we'll go after the caliper bracket. The trick here is, you will see here in a minute, but there is on the rear of this guy, a single piston that, just like the cylinder inside of your engine, it's going to go up and down. In this case, it's going to go left and right, which as a boxer engine with the Subaru, I guess is like the pistons in the engine. Anyways, so the trick here is you're going to want to try and pull the caliper out towards you. And what that's going to do is it's going to compress the piston, and it's going to make getting this guy off all the easier. While you may be able to pull this off as it is, that's because the brake pads are currently 1/4 of the thickness they originally were. So when you go to put the new pads on, it's going to be thicker, which is going to make this more shimmed, which essentially is going to make this tighter. And we're also putting on a probably thicker brake caliper, or rotor. So we're just going to go ahead and give ourselves the largest amount of slop as we can. At this point, we're going to get the most leverage by this not being able to move and me just trying to pull this out towards me. Now it's not going to be fast, but you can see right here, this guy is compressing a little bit. So that tells me that my piston is not frozen, which I was kind of wondering would be good cause. This side would wear out faster than the left side if ideally the brake caliper will calibrate. It will squeeze your brake rotor once you apply the brake, and as you let off, it will open itself back up. And that's because there's now a negative pressure. You're no longer pushing on it. It's going to push the fluid back up to the brake fluid reservoir up in your engine bay, and it will start allowing itself to relax, just like you trying to grab something. You grab it and then it will relax off of it. And actually that just fell right off. So beautiful. All right, so right here is our piston. And did I mention rest belt? I feel like we did. You can see right now it's quite a ways out, but as I squeeze, I can slowly, and it should be slowly, it shouldn't be fast. You are fighting, not trying to push metal into metal, but you're metal on metal while trying to push a, liter, whatever, of fluid back up into a reservoir. So it should be a slow and steady thing. But you can see that's already, that's half as far out as it was. So we're going to try and compress that the rest of the way. If it doesn't move quite so easily, you can go ahead and use a C-clamp. And you would C-clamp onto here and start tightening, and that will force this to retract as well. But this is telling me that my brake caliper appears to be moving freely, which is what we want. So that fell right off. That's fantastic. Now we get to the remains of the brake pads. Did I mention we're in the rust belt? And this one is absolutely gone. Do wear gloves if you care about that kind of thing. I'm going to probably require a screwdriver or a leverage bar to get that out the rest of the way. The trick with these is they go into a slot right here and right there. You'll see it better on the new brake pads. So you can't really just leverage them out. They more want to be pulled straight out at a perpendicular angle, not walked into place. So let's go ahead and get a screwdriver and make this a little faster. All right, so we have a brake pad with no more brake pad on it. We were metal on metal, and that is why you will have the striations, the washboardness of that guy. So this one failed, it looks like not too long ago, but we have a completely failed brake pad there. We're going to go after the rear one. Again, this is going to be a little tricky to leverage out of the way. So let's see what we got going on here. It has just the littlest bit of wiggle. There we go. All right. All right. So we have completely gone versus what you should be seeing. This is the actual brake pad material versus the brake pad material. These are the 4 points that the material is molded or held onto place with the metal. And if we turn it sideways, you can see the width of the metal bracket that holds the adhesive or the abrasive, brake material is about the same thickness as the brake material on the remaining pad. So we have a uneven grab on this rear caliper. I've replaced these brake components and rotor think it was a year and a half ago. So I think it's been about 15,000, maybe 17,000 miles. I can confirm on my logbook. I'm sure you guys are super eager to get actual numbers on that. But you can see where the piston of the brake caliper was making contact with that one, pushing it in. And that's what we got. So we have a, well, you know what? We'll go ahead and pull out a new brake pad and we will compare the absolutely gone to the, I would say probably 80-90% gone pad versus the brand new ones. All right, and just for reference, we paid $85 in pieces parts. We have the brake pads and the brake rotor. So you're looking at less than $100 in components, and it's probably going to be less than an hour worth of work on these guys. Plus, you have the satisfaction of knowing that you did it right, assuming you watch this video or other ones. And you get a better understanding of how the car operates, how much rust you have underneath. You can address that. I'm going to try and address that on my way out as well. But I feel that if you can do it, or if you're willing to attempt it, watch my video as well as others. Do not take one source's information as gospel. These are brakes. These are pretty essential, but it turns out the components are quite simple, and putting them on is quite simple as well. So, hey, baby girl. So if you're interested in trying them yourself, it's honestly not too complicated. It doesn't take too much in tools, but you've seen all that. Let's go ahead and go a little bit further in. So once we open these up, you're going to have the mounting hardware, which we are going to replace because, have I mentioned rust belt? And then you have, hello baby girl. You have the brake pads themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these open. Hi baby boy. We're going to go ahead and cut these open. We're going to compare them to the old ones, and you can see why we're running into the issues we are. Okay, so we're back over at our rim. We have the new pads, and we have our old partial pad and our why we're here today pad. So again, we can compare this one to this one if the camera should cooperate. So we have a little bit of pad on there. Let's see, what would I use as a frame of reference? I guess I don't have one. So let's go fingernails. That's maybe 1/8 of an inch. For those of you who don't know, from the tip of your finger to your first joint should be 1 inch. From this joint to that joint should be 2 inches and 3 inches. So you have a built-in ruler. If we look there, call it 1/8 of an inch remaining material. And we are now going to compare that to a brand new pad. And my time today is not wasted. So if we put them side by side, honestly have maybe half the pad left. So I have an unevenly grabbing caliper, and I noticed that again a year and a half ago when I replaced them. I had the same situation going. Now here's the thing too. I can say this is at least more than halfway, and you can kind of see the line right there. But on the new pads, that shouldn't have worked so well. There is a slot about, wouldn't you call that halfway, maybe 60% of the way cut through the material. Now that's going to allow some heat dissipation. You have more surface area. That's going to allow any grit, grime, rocks, gravel, debris, anything like that. It's going to give it a place to be jettisoned or removed from the braking apparatus as it's being applied. It's going to allow the water to slick out of the way and get out of the way, instead of the whole thing being a uniform surface. So we can at least, based on that indicator, that would be a wear indicator, we can at least know that we are at least 50%, if not 60% of the way through that pad. So considering it is falling apart, we will not be keeping this even as a backup. So El Trasho, El Scrapo, straight metal. And then we have these guys here. So you'll notice on this one, it fell apart, but it is being sandwiched into place by the brake caliper. You have a metal pad. Now that metal pad's going to reinforce this metal pad, and it's also going to help distribute the pressure of the brake caliper piston pushing on that. So you want to make sure that this guy is in place and it will stay in place. It shouldn't easily shake off, fall off, anything like that, which we have. And you'll notice we have 2 of these. And we have 2 of these. Now these are going to be additionals compared to this, right? So these are bolted into place. And that's going to be a wear indicator. Apparently this one failed, but this one had it as well. And you will notice on the one that failed, this guy is completely level with the rest of the wear surface versus this one that actually protrudes a little bit from the metal brake pad holder, we'll call it backing. So that protrudes down about, we'll call it 10% of the way through. So ideally, when the brake is applied, once all this material is weared away, it's going to start, start scraping up against this indicator, and this indicator should squeal like a banshee, and that will tell you that you're running low on brakes. So we want to make sure that those are oriented correctly on this guy. This is, you'll notice, I took 2 pads off, but I'm showing you 4 new pads. The pads typically come in a set, so I have a set for the rear right and rear left wheels. I'll keep the 2 in my tool bag in the back of the car, so I have them when I need them. Now the only thing I'll need to order is the rotor for when that side fails, which should be probably 2 to 3 months. With the amount of driving I do, that's how it happened last time. So we are going to go ahead and go a little bit further on this guy, do some cleaning up and all, and then we'll go ahead and put in our new pads. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and take off the old mounting brackets. They should just press into place. They will be harder to get out than they are to get in, as you get more and more rust and heat expansions and cool downs, thermal expansions. They're going to start warping and stuff like that. So just keep trying at it, keep prying at it. Leverage is your friend. Dorking up your fingers is not. So get a tool in there, just keep prying on it. Okay. And this one is free. So honestly, if we were to take our metal brush, it would shine up perfectly fine. But why risk it when we have new ones in the pack? So we're just going to go ahead and replace these guys, and the next step will be to clean out the area that these contact in. Again, as I just said, debris buildup and rust and corrosion and all that is going to close the tolerances of the machined gaps in the brake caliper bracket. So we're going to clean those up as best we can, which will make the new ones fit in and stay in better. So go ahead and the intention here is to get them off, get them out. It is not to reuse them, so don't worry about changing the geometries or anything like that. Just go ahead and pry it out of place. So we have the same thing here, and we have another indicator that as this one was sitting here, when I pull it off, we have more grit and crap here. So this is the side that had the brake fail on. So this one's going to have a lot more debris and stuff. If we look at the other one, I imagine it would be the case as well. So they're going to sit like this. I did clean this part, so that's not really fair. But you can see here, it's still relatively shiny versus here. you have some of the buildup. So another indicator that the side outermost from the vehicle is the side that failed. If we go here, it feels a lot smoother than this side, and I also have a pretty prominent lip right here and right there. So that brake pad ideally should be the wear component here. The rotor should survive longer, but with every vehicle I've owned so far, 3, in the rust belt area, you're essentially going to be replacing rotors as you replace your brake pads, subject to your own personal mileage and stuff like that. All right, so before we get too much further in there, I'm going to go ahead and scrub away what I can. It's honestly not taking too much leverage on my part. It's honestly not going to make too much of a difference with the functionality of my brakes, but just as we have wear indications here and there with the brackets and this, that, and the other, I will no longer receive that feedback if I do not have a clean surface to begin with. So I'm going to lean back, let that stuff blow away. I'm just going to knock it loose. You can see, I mean, 3 or 4 scrubs and it's just coming right off. So it's not rusting through anything more than surface rust. Surface buildup, actually. All right, so you can see that's quite a bit better there. Okay, now we're going to get this up out of the way here. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and remove this bracket, see if there's anything we can't do with it. We're going to clean it up as well. It's going to be easier if it's not on the car. So let's go ahead and do that. To do that, we're going to be going after the, I believe it was a, what did I say? A 17. It's going to be a 17 millimeter. And I know that because it fits. And we're going to do the same one down there. That will allow this bracket to come off. We'll go ahead and examine it. We'll go ahead and clean it. We'll go ahead and grease it, lube it, and we'll go ahead and start rebuilding. All right, so I did loosen these up, but I'll show you the process of taking them off. This is coming off with a washer, at least on the top one. As we go after the bottom one, it does have a washer as well. So with brakes and most things in life, if you take it off, it should probably be put back on. So we do not save fuel efficiency by making the vehicle lighter by losing any kind of washers or anything like that. Make sure you keep track of them, make sure you see them on the way off, and make sure you can put them back on as you reassemble. All right, so at this point, we have our caliper bracket. All right, pro tip. Wear pants you don't love. Got some old desert camo pants and I have my work jacket on. So you're going to get dirty, you're going to get dusty, and we haven't even gotten to the grease yet. So go ahead and plan accordingly. Nothing white. Pretend it's the day after Labor Day. But at this point, we have our caliper bracket. And this was sitting there. Now it is not. So you'll see there's a ridge right through here. And that is where your brake rotor is going to be allowed to free spin. So then you have the cutouts here, which as I get a brake pad, you can see the locking lug here and the lug there is going to slide through the channels. And this is essentially all they're going to do. So they're going to open. When you apply the brake, they're going to close. And when you let off the brake, they are going to reopen. So we put both of them here. This is as you are driving down the road. As you engage the brake, they are going to constrict. They are going to grab both sides of your brake rotor. A lot of surface area. We used to rely, I had a Saturn Vue SUV, and its rear brake was actually a drum brake. So instead of two brake pads grabbing both sides of your disc brake, inside this guy would be two, instead of curved like a half moon shape, like this one kind of sort of is, they were actually curved like a hammock. So you would have typically like this, and the idea would be as you apply, they would press out on the inside of this drum. That's why they were drum brakes. And the benefit there is it doesn't matter if you live by the ocean or you have humidity, or you hypothetically, but also in reality, live in the Rust Belt. They're going to be relatively enclosed. They are inside of a drum. So ice isn't going to affect them. Water isn't going to affect them as much. Salt water, as much. Dirt, all that stuff. But you're going to have less surface area for those pads to engage on, and you're going to have less heat dissipation. Turns out when you're trying to slow down a 3, 4, 5, 6,000 pound car by slamming metal up against a abrasive product like a brake pad, you generate a shit ton of heat. That heat is going to help destroy the rotor, which is why we're going to be replacing it. But this way, by both of them grabbing on the same side, once you release, you're going to have an air cushion generated by the essentially turbine effect of this guy spinning through the brake pads, directly cooling the surface that was in contact, creating the heat to begin with. And then let's say your brake pads are only, well, let's know that my brake pad is only engaging here. And even then, it's not this surface, it's that surface, which you can see has been beveled a little bit, so it's even less than this footprint, but follow along. So let's say that's 10% of your rotor that's being grabbed. As it is spinning, that means 90% of it is able to dissipate that heat into the environment around it, which is going to keep your brakes cooler longer under heavier loads than the drum brakes. That said, I've never had to replace drum brakes. It's all a trade-off, but that's what we got. So we're going to go ahead and clean this guy up. We're not going to do anything too fancy. It's perfectly functional. But again, I want to be able to indicate the wear with the wear indicators, so I need to get rid of the current indications. All right, so I went ahead and cleaned the one side and left the other one the way it was, just to show you guys. You can use brake cleaner, carb cleaner on this. I don't have very much remaining, and I'll show you why I'm keeping the stuff that I have. But all it took was a little bit of scrubbing with our steel brush. Two tricks. One, don't breathe this stuff in. Not good for you. And second, it's a lot more difficult to breathe this stuff in if you're constantly blowing, like you're trying to blow out a candle. The benefit to constantly blowing is when you're scrubbing this, I'm going to try and hold you stable. You can see like a cloud of that stuff coming off. It's just, it's essentially like tartar on your teeth. It comes off pretty easily, but you do have to brush at it. So as this is coming off, it's going to be releasing a cloud of this stuff into the air. If you're constantly blowing on it, one, you're not breathing in, and two, you're blowing all those particles away from you. So simple trick, keeps you healthy, keeps you safe. I'm going to go ahead and clean up this side. I'll get back with you. All right, so we are back. I have scrubbed both sides of this. I'm not looking to get it mint. I'm not looking to get it factory. I'm looking to get it clean. So definitely clean out these channels. That's kind of the biggest reason we're in there, as well as the surfaces here and here, here and here. And that is where we're going to put on the new hardware for that. Okay, while we're in here, I don't really care to clean the rotor because that's getting replaced. But I do want to go ahead and start cleaning this up. And you can see the black paint's still there. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not even surface rust. It's just surface brake pad explosion. So I'm going to try cleaning that up. I'm going to go ahead and wait until I get this guy off though. But we are going to want to clean that up. As I said, these are all wear indications that I want to be able to be indicated that there is wear. So we're going to want to clean this up on our way out. At this point, we're going to want to take the rotor off, and we may need to do some harmonic shock therapy to knock this guy off. Although, Subaru gives you 2 holes right here, which I believe there's supposed to be a bolt or something. I forgot where it was. I feel like it's this one. So you can pull this one out and it will thread into that. Of course, that's assuming that there's no rust, which is what I have. So I'm not going to risk pulling and dorking that bolt up. I have a spare one that I keep in my toolkit. The idea is if I whack at this with a hammer, which is typically what you'd have to do, all it takes is me accidentally tagging one of these 5 studs, and I've either dented the threading or I bent it enough where I'm kind of screwed. So by putting in these threaded holes, I can go ahead and try to tighten a bolt into those places that will pull the brake rotor out towards me and make my life a lot easier. So let's see if that works. All right, so this is the one that fits. I don't have a metric socket or wrench that'll fit that, so I'm using the adjustable wrench here. You should be met with some resistance as you cut your way through the rust. You'll see I'm doing about a half rotation in and a 1/10 of a rotation back. That's what you do when you tap and die into metal. You can hear that rotor is starting to give. All right, and it's now free, so I can go ahead and probably, nope, not yet. So I'm going to back this guy out. We're going to switch it to the other side here. Hi, baby girl. Please stay back. Thank you. All right. And we're going to cut in until we're met with resistance. Back up. Back up. I already heard a click. Probably freed up the rust and corrosion. All right, it's now free spinning, and you can see the rotor angle is changing. So I'm going to leave that in. Yep, there we go. That'll take a little bit of negotiating. But we are better than we were. Now, if you had 2 of these bolts, you could just walk it off. Did I plan ahead? Beautiful. My son has discovered that our yard is infiltrated by the dreaded worm, and he is informing me of their existence. So this one's pretty shallow. I don't even know if it will work to get the hub off. The idea was this one actually has a bigger head to bite onto or get a metric socket onto, but it is actually pulling. And you can see I'm using this like a screwdriver instead of coming in at an angle. That's twofold. One, I don't have any throw with this being shallower than the stubs, the studs there. And then second, I really don't need the tension or the torque to get that off. So there was a kerflooey. Oh, you know what I'm fighting? I'm fighting my parking brake. There is... Thanks, electric company. There is a... I was telling you about the drum brakes in here. There are... Thanks, electric company. There are drum brakes inside of this guy, and that will act as your parking brake. So, stand by. All right, so parking brake is off, and wouldn't you know, that just walks right off. So, while we're here, let's take a look-see. This is exactly what I was describing. So you have two brake pads, brake shoes. They're going to be angled like moons. And when you engage the brake, it's going to push the pads out. And that's going to grip on the inside of the rotor there. So if you have a automatic transmission, make sure that, well, how would that work with an auto? Can't have your parking brake, so you'd probably have to have it in gear. I don't know. I row my own gears. So make sure that you are with a manual put into any gear and go ahead and deactivate your parking brake. As soon as I released the parking brake, I heard a ka-toing, and that was the springs. The brake pads were pulled out a little bit towards me, so once it was released, they essentially shrunk, closed their diameter, and that allowed the brake pads to kerpoing under spring tension back into their original seated position. So that is our rotor. You can see a little bit of surface rust and all on the inside there, but this is the side that had the most excitement. All right, so like I said, we disengaged the parking brake. I'm going to go ahead and scrub the pads. I'm going to scrub the splash guard there. We're going to clean that up a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and prep our new brake rotor, and we'll go ahead and start putting her back together. All right, so we cleaned it up a little bit, and I went ahead and did this side, and you can see it compared to this one. We're just going to do this top section here. You can see that powder coming off. That powder is going to act as ball bearings in between your brake pad and the brake rotor. So you're going to want to dust off as much of that as you can. Again, we're not looking for a mirror finish or anything, but we're going to remove that dust from the equation. That's going to make the pads last longer and grip better because you do not have something free floating in between the two surfaces that are supposed to come in contact with each other. All right, so here we have my new shooting target, old rotor. Here we have the new rotor. And you'll notice it is sealed in this bag. They spray these guys with a compound that helps them to stay nice and clean and shiny. And that compound becomes an issue when we are trying to use it as a brake rotor. That compound is a spray-on, and that will act as a chemical that will prevent the brake pads from grabbing quite so well. So the trick with that is to use brake parts cleaner we're going to spray down the surface area of the rotor and the inside of the drum, because as we saw, I do have the parking brake that engages on that surface, so we're going to go ahead and spray that as well. Now, brake parts cleaner is a very, very terrible compound, so we want to make sure that we do not absorb it into our skin and we do not breathe it. In order to do that, the bag that it came in, go ahead and have that in between you and the spray. Gauge the direction of the wind. Make sure that the indicator is actually lined up with the paint indicator there, and that will show you the direction this thing's going to spray. So, go ahead and glove up. Okay, it evaporates pretty quickly. I do have it on this cardboard box. I'd rather it go on the box in the trash than sit in my yard for the rainwater to take it away. But we're going to go ahead and spray that surface as well. We're going to let that sit for a bit, do its thing. You don't want to just wipe it off. You want it to get into the metal and you want it to start breaking down the compound, but you can see right there that it is already starting to evaporate away. It's not particularly warm today. It's just shy of 60 degrees. So we're going to let that sit for a bit. And we're also going to go ahead and use this on the exposed parts of the rear hub there. So we scrubbed it. We're going to have this do some work as well. All right. We're just going to let that work its magic. Make sure that there's no parts or anything underneath it. And we'll let it dry away. Alright, so while we're letting those parts dry from the brake cleaner, we're going to go ahead and install our hardwares. We're going to put this right here. So along the spine of the bracket, we're going to have the two larger portions, and you're just going to push those down into place, and you want to make sure that we are lined up here. So we don't want it sitting like this. We're going to want it sitting like that, in line with the gap. Okay, to aid with that, these little teeth should be in contact with the outer surfaces. If you're overhanging like this, clearly you're not going to get that lined up because it needs to be flush with that surface. That one just clicked into place. I'm going to go ahead and click the rest of it in. Okay, so again, we want tall teeth in line with the bracket itself. Go ahead and start with this side first, and then push these into place. Okay, that one snapped pretty nice. That one just returned as well. So now we have the hardware installed. That's going to provide the brake pads a nice, smooth, newly tensioned surface to engage on. If I grab one of the pads, this is going to go, let's see. So if that's mounted onto the, nope, it would be like this. This is going to go in here and there, and this is in the way. So let's grab the smooth one. Gonna go like that. Gonna go like that. All right. So essentially, that's going to hold the pad in place, and it's going to allow it to free slide across for the opening and closing of the caliper. But we've got them installed. Let's go back over to our rotor. All right, so we have the new rotor. simply line up this guy, that one, and it should slide right into place. All right. So this is missing the cap from the old one. We're going to go ahead and put that back into place, and then we're going to continue on from there. All right, so the plug has been reinstalled. We're going to go ahead and start lubing up the brake caliper there and start putting her back together. I got this Slide Glide brake lube caliper slides. That's what we're going to be using it for. Let's clean off our finger a little bit better. I would say the best way to go about this, put it on one of the lugs there, turning it a very interesting blue color. Okay, and then I'm going to slide that inside here. And I'm going to do that for each one of them. Okay. Also, so that's going to transfer a little bit. I thought it would do a little bit better than that. It's very small points of contact there. So I'm just going to go ahead and slick it in there. Get in there real nice and good. Doesn't take much. So we know we did that one. Go ahead and glob it. Any excess you put in there, you don't want too much. It's going to start accumulating the debris and all. So you don't want too much on there. But any excess you put on there will be essentially boiled away by the heat of the pads engaging. So we have that squared away. Let's go ahead and reinstall. Nope, we want to go ahead and put the, we'll put this bracket on first, and then we'll go ahead and engage the pads. So I got this on an extension. We're going to go ahead and, guess I can't use the extension on this top one. I'm going to get this finger tighted. Less likely to dork up the threads if I do it by hand. So right about there. Do the same with the bottom. Try to get my hand out of the way there. Additionally, by seating this the inch that I can by hand, that is going to allow me to get an extension in there where I can do a little bit more. So that was probably a half rotation more. This one was about 2 full rotations, and now I can go ahead and torque them down. I believe it's 12 foot-pounds of torque on these guys. All right, so I set it to 12, and I essentially hand tightened it to 12. So turns out they are 58. So we're going to spin this guy until it would help if I'm looking at the right gauge. So we have 50 right here, and I'm going to rotate this until I get to the 0. So I am at 50 plus 0 increments, and I'm going to rotate that to 58. So we want it in line. I'm just shy of 60. And I'm 50 plus 8 puts me at 58. I'm going to tighten this guy, which will prevent that handle from rotating. And I'm going to go ahead and re-torque those down to the 58. All right, so that was a 17 millimeter, which we torqued to the 58 foot-pounds. And as I do with the lug nuts on the way out, we have an airplane, bear with me. I did the top one and then the bottom one, and then I did the top one and the bottom one. I would rather torque it twice and have it walk out once. So cheap insurance there. Let's go ahead and get those pads installed and we can move on from there. All right, so there is a polarity to these. I believe the ones that do not have the noisemaker, the warning, are bidirectional. You can put them in like this or put them in like that. These guys, though, with this extension, if I were to try and put them in up here, they're going to hit this bracket. So they're going to have to be installed in the back, and that noisemaker is going to be at the bottom of the brake pad there. So before we get them in, a trick I've learned from my dad is go find a sidewalk and grind these on the sidewalk surface. And that's going to knock off any kind of storage. Sometimes they will coat these for storage. So it will rough up the surface, make them more likely to bite, kind of get them ready for the task at hand. And it will also scrape off any kind of surface sealants that they have installed on these. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and come on back. So these are the two post sidewalks versus one that has not been done. And you can see this one has some reflectivity to it, some more shine to it than this one, which is kind of more flattish. So the sidewalk scuffing will help knock off that layer and make it bite a little bit more. So we're going to put you to the side. We're going to go ahead and this is the, I'm going to line up the top tooth and rock in the bottom. Top tooth. Top tooth. This is what you're running into. Okay, so this one's going to be easier to see anyways. We're going to go ahead and put you in there. You're going to want to push against the surface of this guy with the brake pad. So I'm going to get the top one lined up. I'm going to push that bracket forward. Okay, with a screwdriver, I'm going to push that bracket forward quite a ways. Let's see. Tricky little bugger. And into place, all right? So it's going to look like this. The wing, so this would be sitting like that, right? So the wings are going to be pushed out of the way and held in place like that. This top part will allow it to slide, and this part will keep the angle correct. And then on the bottom, you're going to have to push this wing forward and then push it down into the slot. And that's what we did here. And we can see that they will slide around a lot easier than the ones I just removed. Due to the shaky of this tripod mount, you're just going to have to trust me that I'm going to install this one correctly on the backside. I won't show you the process, but I will show you that it is there. All right, so we have brake pad, caliper, rotor, and they are free floating enough for our purposes. So we went ahead and cleaned the rotor, placed the rotor, reattached the mounting bracket, put in the brake pads. Next up is going to be the caliper. Now remember, with the caliper, we did squeeze it in as best we could. So hopefully, let's see how well we can get in. Ooh, nice. So this guy just flops right over it. I have maybe a credit card's amount of space in between there. So that was able to press right on into place. Note, these are on a rubber boot, which essentially free floats. So it may be sticking out and you may be fighting that. you'll have to make sure that those are fully seated in order to get your caliper to slip on over. So that was super simple. Okay, I just remembered. This is the slide pin right here. I just told you it's kind of under spring tension. If you grab the boot and pull, you want to make sure that this guy has been greased and has the proper grease on it. And that's also where the brake lube Scylla slide stuff comes in. Alright, so now we can go ahead and get this caliper in place. Again, we would have compressed this guy, so now it just slides right on, which is fantastic. I'm snagging at the bottom, and that's because the slide pin is compressible. It's almost spring-loaded, essentially. So I'm going to want to move the caliper out while pushing this guy in, and now they just slide right over. So, fantastic. Let's go ahead and get those 14 millimeters 1 and 2 put back on. Recall that the 1 and 2s had the 17s had the washer on them. The 14s did not. So we're going to go ahead and shake the caliper around, get that one started. Now we only have the one pivot point as we line up. Oh, that one just fell right into place. So I'm going to go ahead and finger tight them. I'm going to snug them. I'm going to look up the torquage, and we're going to get those put into place proper. All right, so our 14s are going to be set to 29 foot-pounds. So I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to go ahead and loosen this all the way. We're going to thread down to 0. So that's 10. That's 20, that's 30, but I want 29. So we have 20 plus increment of 9, puts us at 29. I'm going to tighten that locking nut. I'm going to go ahead and tighten those 14s back into place. So that's our click right there. Okay, so we are now all set with that. We're going to do a quick look over, make sure we didn't leave anything behind. I think we're all right. We're going to go ahead and put the tire on. We will need to make sure that we repump our brake. Again, we went ahead and opened up the brake caliper as much as we could. We pushed the piston back in. That means that the slop that we had, which allowed us to actually seat the caliper over those brake pads, that slop is going to become a liability now, because when we step on the brake, that piston's going to push and it's going to be nowhere near engaging on that rotor. So the first time you get in the car, your brakes are going to feel pretty squishy. You're going to pump them 5-10 times and make sure that you refill the reservoir, which is going to refill the puck there. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Let's go ahead and start putting the tire back on. So I scrubbed and washed the tire as best I could. It's not all going to come off, but the nice thing is, since I shouldn't be contributing any more to it, the more it rains and stuff, the more it's going to wear off. So we're going to go ahead and start putting it back on the car. All right, so we have now hand tightened our lug nuts. We are still off the ground here, so I'm going to go ahead and jack up the suspension, pull the jack out, remove our jack stand, lower it to the ground, and we're going to retorque the torque nuts twice to 92 foot-pounds. All right, so our jack and stand is no longer under the car. We're gonna go ahead and retorque these guys twice. And there we go. We have replaced the rear rotor, replaced the rear brake pads, cleaned up on our way out. Went ahead and re-tightened the lug nuts to the set parameters. Again, look it up online. Make sure you're setting it to the right foot poundage. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and remove the wheel chocks. I'm going to go ahead and pump up the brakes. Do make sure you do that. You could have up to 25% less breakage, because this brake is not going to be engaging and it could be pulling fluid from the rest of the system as it tries pumping this one. So do make sure that you pump your brakes a number of times before you take it anywhere. And let's see what we got past that point. So we're quite squishy on that first one. This is with the car off. I do not have the brake booster on. But that first one went 3/4 of the way down to the ground. So give it a couple pumps and then again, remove your wheel chocks and you should be good to go. Again, since you're following this video, you're following my recommendations. I appreciate that. I recommend after a complete repair or replacement on a car, treat yourself to Dairy Queen. And then once you get back, make sure that the repair that you've done is still holding. Make sure that everything is still torqued the way it needs to be. It's better to torque your tires 5 times than to have your tire fall off the 1 time. So keep that torque wrench with you, take it with you where you go, and make sure that everything is where it needs to be and stays there. All right, and the last thing we have is to document the mileage in a logbook. I track the time and the mileage and what I did, and that will give me a logbook to keep track of all that stuff. So let me go ahead and look up when I replaced the rear brake last. So again, we have 68,000 on it, and the last time I did the rear brake rotors was at 43. So yeah, that puts us at, what is that? 25. So I guess come on, focus. I guess I wasn't too bad off as I thought. So that is the complete brake rotor and brake pad replacement on a 2018 Subaru Forester base model. That's all we got for today. So I'm currently doing 35 miles an hour. I'm going to push in the clutch, so all you hear is the tires, and we're going to slowly decel. So you heard a pretty good grinding noise. It got more prevalent as we were approaching 0 miles an hour. This is a before, and I'll try and do the same sound for once we replace the rotors and the brake pads. So I have the windows open right now. I have less grinding as I'm driving. I'm doing 35, making a right-hand turn at an intersection, and she is super smooth. I don't have the noise anymore. It almost sounded like the brake pads were, or the brake caliper was maybe hanging or grinding. I no longer have that. I have no one behind me right now. I'm doing 40. We're gonna roll the windows up. Sorry, Inara. Dog over. So I'm doing 40. I'm going to apply the brake. No pulsation, no dragging, no grinding, nothing. Sounds excellent. And that was kind of the big indicator to me, is I had a perpetual grind. I had a, and again, that was as I started accelerating away from stops. Probably that rotor got overheated, metal on metal versus abrasive on metal, and it allowed it to warp the least littlest bit. And once it warps, just like a record on a record player, which I'm sure is a frame of reference everyone listening to this will understand, but the slightest crease in a record, when you listen back to particularly sound effects from 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s sitcoms, the laugh track, there's usually a ha 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 laughing, or the sound effect will bing bong, and it kind of mutes itself or restricts itself as it's playing through the longer sound effects. All that to say, the slightest kind of deviation or warpage in there, as you saw during the rebuild, there's very little space for that rotor to fit by design in between those brake pads. You don't want a lot of travel. You want it to aggressively bite into that rotor as soon as you start stepping on the brake. So I just slowed from 35 down to about 7-10 miles an hour, making a right-hand turn at an intersection, and it's super smooth. So I'm very excited about that. It cost less than $100. It cost me maybe 2.5 hours, 3 hours, but I was recording, which adds quite a bit of time to the process, and only maybe a dozen or so swear words. So not so bad, but again, that's what we got. It's super simple. Even up here in the Rust Belt, I would have had the hardest job. Luckily, Subaru thought about that and put those 2 threaded holes in the brake rotor, which is fantastic. I haven't seen that before. Maybe that's just across the board. But I think that works very well. It absolutely breaks the rust off without me having to go at it with a sledgehammer, as we had to with the wife's Chevy Equinox. So that is where we are. I'm going to go ahead and either cut back to the original video, or I'm going to go ahead and put a closer in right here. So as always, this is outside the target demographic. I appreciate you guys stopping by. This is kind of a first in a series for me with basic car repairs, maintenance, things that I do with my Subaru, and things that you could probably do with your car as well. Washing, waxing, cleaning the engine bay, oil replacements. I've recently learned about fuel injection ways that you can clean out a direct injection engine, which is what the Subaru Forester is. So I'll do a video on that as well. But again, I appreciate you guys stopping by. Any questions, comments, concerns you have, leave them in the comments section below. It's always good hearing from you guys. I enjoy the community I'm starting to develop here, and any kind of feedback you have is always appreciated. Again, outside the target demographic, I'm talking too much. Catch you in the next video. See you then.